So welcome to this week's Optimal Health Clinic Facebook Live. And this week I wanted to talk about kind of a follow-on a little bit from last week's video, which was around saying yes to you and saying yes to you as being a much more positive way of seeing it than saying no to others. So I wanted to kind of develop a bit more of when we're saying yes to us, and another way of putting that is listening to our own emotions, listening to our own body. Why does that have a calming impact on our nervous system? Because it does. One of the things that we notice is when we listen to our emotions, we listen to our body, that our maladaptive stress response will often calm and soothe in response to that. Let's just, before we kind of come into the kind of the why and the how, let's just come back to maladaptive stress response is the body being in its emergency mode. It's in its emergency mode because it doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel safe because, or one of the reasons, and there are different facets to this, but one of the reasons is if we've had a history of not listening to our body and ignoring our body for years, in fact, that being one of the causes, one of the factors in causing someone to get sick is a kind of progressive achiever pattern, helper pattern, not listening to the body, pushing through and kind of driving a state of burnout. It's obviously not the only piece of the picture, there's many other pieces, but a piece of the picture. That there is then a specific sensitivity in our body to feeling like we're not listening to it. It's almost like when we ignore our emotions, or when we ignore our symptoms or our body, it's almost like our nervous system pulls the fire alarm. It's like it goes into a state of stress response because it's almost like because that was done for so many years and wasn't listened to and it had the impact it had, our body and our nervous system is then smart enough to realize that it needs to stop us doing that in the future. And particularly on the recovery path, when we ignore our body and our emotions, we tend to have mini crashes. And so our system gets smart and our system gets very sensitized towards preventing us from doing that. And so when we start to really listen, and we listen on an emotional level, so if we feel sad about something, we feel angry about something, we feel scared about something, if we actually allow ourselves to have those feelings and we listen to those feelings, that has a deeply calming and soothing impact. It's almost like having a really sore throat and then taking like some warm, nourishing soup or having some lemon and honey or something that actually soothes it. Like we can feel the sense of calming and settling that comes as a result of doing that. Same thing is true with our emotions. Same thing is true with our symptoms. If we actually listen to them, we actually make space for them. And I don't mean kind of going off on lots of anxiety patterns and feeding them and all of that stuff. I mean actually feeling into the communication that's trying to be made. Then our system doesn't need to pull the fire alarm. It doesn't need to kind of trigger this kind of state of maladaptive stress response to get our attention. Because it feels like we're listening. It feels like it already has our attention. So when it feels that it's being heard, it then can send a different message. The message it then sends is a message of calming, a message of soothing, a message of we can turn off the stress response because it's not needed anymore. There's no reason for the fire alarm to keep going off if the fire's been taken care of, or if we discover there's no fire. So it's really helpful to understand the maladaptive stress response, that state of being kind of wired, that state of being unable to relax, being overstimulated, as being the body's emergency system, which is triggering. And often it's triggering unnecessarily, and it's triggering unhealthily, and sometimes it's hard to understand why it's triggering. It's why we call it a maladaptive stress response rather than just a stress response. It's become maladaptive. But to turn that response off, yes, there are things to do in terms of stopping certain thought patterns and calming the nervous system and the kind of the specific work we do around that. But this additional piece I wanted to speak to in this session is the piece around when we have feelings or emotions, to see that as a communication, to see that as something that if we listen to it, it can calm and can settle. Like a phone that's ringing, we answer the phone doesn't need to keep ringing. But if we don't answer it, if we don't pay attention to the communication, then it's going to keep on screaming. It's going to keep on ringing. It's going to keep on making noise until it feels listened to and understood. Another way of thinking about it is if you think about having a small child, and a small child is upset for some reason. It's fallen over, or it's been misunderstood, or it wants to get a certain need met. And rarely does it need in that moment a solution. It doesn't need some problem-solving parent to come in and go, right, we need this, and that. What it needs is to be held and to feel supported, to feel connected, to feel loved, to feel nourished. And that's often can be physical in terms of hugs. It can be emotional in terms of soothing language and feeling kind of supported. But when it gets that need met, very often it will calm down very quickly. And very often that emotion will pass very quickly. If it doesn't get that need met, often it will exaggerate the communication to get the need met until the need is met. And so as adults, we can get very good at not listening to our emotional needs. And we can think that, well, if I do listen to my emotional needs, what's the point? And if I listen, it will never change. And I need to have a solution. I need to not feel this way. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do, sometimes the thing that has the biggest impact, can appear like doing nothing. And what I mean by that is actually listening. But it's not doing nothing. It's actually doing something incredibly powerful, which is giving the presence of our attention to ourself. A little bit like small child needs parent, gets real contact with parent, like feels nourished and held and emotionally met by that parent. Very quickly, emotions will settle, it'll normalize, and it will run off and want to go and play and do whatever else it wants to go and do. As an adult, same thing is true, but we forget. We think we have to solve it, we shouldn't be feeling it, whatever else. But actually, just listening, just paying attention to our emotions, to how we feel, can have a very powerful, soothing, calming impact on our nervous system. So to go back to the point of the video, we can think, well, what's the point listening to my emotions? Yes, okay, I might feel better emotionally, but how's that going to help my recovery? The way it's going to help is it helps your maladaptive stress response switch off. It helps your body learn to trust you, because it recognizes that if it tries to communicate something, you're actually going to listen to it. So it doesn't need to shout and scream to get your attention. It's very simple in principle, like a lot of the things I talk about in these videos. It's not very easy in practice sometimes. But just try it. Try noticing how you feel. Try paying attention, listening, not trying to fix it, not necessarily trying to change it. And I'm not talking about just letting your mind run away with all the thought patterns. I mean very specifically paying attention to your feelings and listening and giving them attention and seeing what impact that has. And I think you'll find often it can be a helpful way of helping calm and settle your nervous system. Just looking at comments on Hi Tracy and Eureka. Susanna says, my main emotion is frustration, which is due to being so limited because of CFS. So it's difficult to take action to resolve that emotion. So just to reiterate the point, Susanna, I'm actually not talking about, in this instance, I'm not saying that there aren't other instances, but in this particular perspective that I'm talking about, I'm actually talking about allowing the feeling of frustration to be there. Not trying to change it, not trying to fix it, not judging it, not making it wrong, just noticing there's frustration that's there. You feel frustrated. Maybe that's okay in that moment. And actually, if you're allowed to feel how you're feeling, often that can allow things to settle and things to calm down. Karen says, I try to say thank you for the message. It does help settle symptoms, as my pains are often my body shouting out when I'm ignoring them. Yeah, right, exactly. Jenny says this does work, been doing it the past few days. That's great. So good, I hope that's been helpful. Next Wednesday, actually, I am away on family holiday. So I think Marie, one of the psychology team, is going to cover. We're going to try and have some different voices on these Facebook Lives this year. So I will keep trying to do them regularly, but we're going to try and get some different, some of the practitioners to come in and add some of their wisdom, which I'm sure will be a blessed relief for some of you to hear some different people talking. Yeah, I think Marie will be here this time next week. And thank you for watching for tonight. Bye-bye for now.